Kamala Harris has been basically running to the right on immigration and crime, and it's ridiculous. She's lying. She's lying about her record. She's lying about what she actually plans to do. But the fact that she feels the need to present herself as, a border security person and as a crime and a law and order person, the fact that she feels the need to present herself that way, I think shows you that we're winning on those issues.
All right, guys, good Wednesday to you. We've made it over the hump. See the weekend in my sights already. Great show headed your way right now. Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire is going to join us. We're going to talk a lot about culture, his latest movie, and the unbelievable success that they've had. But also, is there enough discussion of culture in the presidential race? And why or why not? I'm going to ask Matt that. So much to get to that's going on this week in the political world. So I want to get to all that. Before I do, let me just tell you, as I say, so many things are unexpected. I know this week, if you live down in Florida or in the Southeast, you know that there's a storm headed your way. And I always say this when, the Patriot Power Generator 2000X is what I have in my house to know that I have power if something were to happen. If the power gets knocked out for an hour, for days, for weeks. I love the Patriot Power Generator 2000X because it doesn't need gas. It runs off a solar panel that comes free with it. Okay. And it powers the most powerful things: the refrigerator, tablets, TVs, phones, medical devices, all those important things in your lives for you and your family and friends. If you've ever been without power, you know how critical this can be. You want to make sure you can communicate and take care of the essentials in your life. That's why I love the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. I've had a gas-powered one in the past, and you always have to worry about gas. Access to it, the fumes, the smell, the noise of the big generator, none of that's the problem with the Patriot Power Generator. If you go to 4patriots.com/Spicer, 4patriots.com/Spicer, you will have one in your house. And I'm telling you, you don't want to wait until you need it to go, I wish I had done what Sean had said. Just do it now. Go on to 4patriots.com/Spicer and get ahead of the curve, because these things sell out all the time. And when that happens, you're either further in the queue. So get ahead of the curve. Make sure that you are ready when an incident happens, whether that's a natural disaster or a weather-related issue or a hit on the power grid. You want to be ready. 4patriots.com/Spicer. I love it because it's portable. You can put it in your car. You can bring it to a neighbor's house. I can pick the thing up. You can bring it in your house. You will not regret this purchase. Trust me on that. All right. A lot to get to with Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire. But I want to hit on a couple other things. This week, President Biden is apparently running around doing some kind of victory lap about all the foreign policy successes. What? I mean, I don't understand how you have the gall to do that. Think about how much has changed. Like, what part of the world are you botched the Afghanistan withdrawal. Russia invaded Ukraine. Iran's firing missiles into Israel. North Korea is more provocative. China is doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And you want to talk about your successes and your legacy? This is one where as the kids say, you might want to sit this one out. But it's not just him. Check this out. President Zelensky of Ukraine came over for the UN. Okay, I get that. It's a big UN meeting. He's here to ask for more money, to beg, hey, can you keep funding me, from all the countries, obviously the US in particular. But then this is like a campaign stop. They give him an Air Force plane to fly where? Where would we send him? Oh, what about Pennsylvania? And hang out with Josh Shapiro, the Democratic governor, and Bob Casey, the Democratic senator, he's up for re-election. And they're going around the state, thanking Pennsylvanians because they make some munitions there. This is a U.S.-funded campaign stop in the most critical battleground state, and you don't think that we were smart enough to figure this thing out? I mean, honest to God, if this was a Republican in office, the media would be going nuts saying that we're using taxpayer finance military resources for a campaign stop. He didn't go to Montana or Wyoming or Alabama by the way, we do a lot of stuff down there. There's a bunch of munitions that we could have highlighted down there. But guess what? Alabama isn't a battleground state, and Pennsylvania is. So, of course, wow, look at how quick he can put together this great video. And, of course, to go in, grip and grin, thanks for all you're doing. And who's with him? All the Democrats. Unbelievable. Our tax dollars at work. And again, no peep from the media. Nothing. Because it's okay. Wink, nod. We get the joke. We're in on it. We'll just say it was awesome that he stopped by. In other news, on the flip side, RFK has been doing these town halls with Tulsi Gabbard and whatever. And he talked about in a Trump administration that there's a bunch of things that he wants on day one, a national emergency against big pharma and big food.
And on day one, we're going to declare an emergency like we did in COVID. But it's going to be a chronic disease emergency, and we're going to get the fluoride out of the water. We're going to get the chemicals out of the food. We're going to get the chemtrails out, the chemicals out of the chemtrails, and there's 1,000 ingredients in our food that are banned in Europe, and we're going to get rid of all those chemicals.
And I know I've had these specials once in a while. I've gotten so into this. And Alex Clark, who joins me, she's got a brand new podcast out where she really focuses on all this. And she has been at the forefront of this. She's not a medical expert. She is a concerned citizen that is suddenly peeling back the onion and saying, look what I found. Look what I found. She goes down these rabbit holes, as I've heard her describe it. And realizing, it's funny, in one podcast, she talks about she was I think the word was a chicken nugget queen or something, right? She had a ton of processed food in her diet. But then she started to realize, here's what we're being sold by big food and big pharma and how bad it is for us in all of these ways of life. Stuff that's in our water, and RFK is talking about this as well, the fluoride and the effects that it's having. But it's about time that somebody started looking out for us. And I think that this issue is going to start transcending. And this is why Kennedy is probably, I go back and forth between Kennedy and Tulsi being the unsung hero. They are bringing people to Donald Trump that probably might not have been there for him and tapping into issues, especially like the big food issue that Kennedy is bringing to light and saying, what's wrong with exposing this and explaining to people what's happening to their health, to their nutrition. I think it's huge. I think it's unreported, and it's not going to be until a bunch of needle nose guys go back after the election and say, did you realize this is all happening? Because they don't want to report on it, because most of these reporters are in bed. Their companies take advertising dollars, right? So they don't want to report on it. They're not willing to even look at it because they'll lose the advertising. This is all about money. That's what it comes down to. All about the money. Big food, big pharma. They advertise to a big degree with these publications and these outlets. And then guess what? They don't cover it. You think anyone else is going to do it? And I think that there is a group of people like Alex Clark that have started to realize what's going on and are growing and growing an audience that care about these issues and are saying, all right, who's going to deal with it? Who's going to expose it? Who's going to help us? Who's going to be our advocate? That's what's going on here. And I think that this is an untapped audience and constituency that is happening. And I think a lot of people have done it. Now, I want to shift gear because you guys know what I think about national polls. They don't matter. We don't vote nationally. We vote by state. And that's why when I do the road to 270, and we're going to have another edition on Friday, why I talk about the states and the blue wall and this, Arizona and North Carolina, because that's what matters. You don't get 270. Who cares? We're not running for the popular vote. Republicans aren't campaigning in California, for example, or Illinois, because we don't run that way. So you're not trying to compete for that. So, Democrats want to whine after the fact, oh, we won the popular vote. Great. That's not how the rules. You don't win by kicking more field goals in football. You win by, total point. And say, those are the rules of the game. That's why it matters. But here is something that is fascinating. When you look at the Gallup trend, it shows Trump up 3. Here we are, just over 40 days out. And it's fascinating because in 2008, it had Obama up 7.2 at this point. Obama was up in 2012, 3.9. Clinton in 2016 was up 2.1, and Biden is up 4.5 in 2020. And right now, Trump is up. What does that mean? If Republicans were to win the popular vote, by the way, it's done. I mean, there's no way. It's the Democrats who can win the popular vote and lose the Electoral College, not the reverse. So if Trump really was trending in a direction to even get it close, he has to win the Electoral College. And again, the one thing I will say about national polls is they are good to look at the trend. This is 2016 was the perfect environment for Hillary Clinton by every stretch of the imagination. She was up 2.1 and Trump crushed it in the battlegrounds. I'm just saying, if you go back and if you listened to what James Blair said yesterday, and you adjust these polls where they all were, not just nationally, but in the states, and say, where are we now? Trump is ahead all over the map. Again, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but the national media won't talk about that because that's not in their interest. They want this to stay close, but they want Kamala to win, and they need enough momentum for her to people to keep donating, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's important to know. All right, two other quick things that I want to put on your radar before we bring in Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire. There is this tradition in election years, presidential election years, to have what they call the Al Smith dinner. It's a dinner in New York that is hosted by the Archdiocese, so it benefits Catholic charities. And it's always been fun where each side kind of pokes fun at a little, right? You remember Trump poked fun at Hillary and Chuck Schumer and Democrats back in the day. Kamala Harris said she's skipping it. She's going to be campaigning in some unknown battleground state. Well, Cardinal Dolan responded, and I want you to play you a little what he had to say.
We're disappointed. We were looking forward to giving the vice president an enthusiastic welcome. And we were confident that she would find this. You know, she speaks very much about the high ideals and how it's good to get away from division and come together in unity and all. Well, that's what the Al Smith dinner is all about. We haven't given up yet. We're not used to this. We don't know how to handle it. This hasn't happened in 40 years since Walter Mondale turned down the invitation. And remember, he lost 49 out of 50 states. I don't want to say there's a direct connection there. But so we're not used to this, and we're not giving up.
He's disappointed. It's a huge snub. And again, she gets a pass because, well, she gets a pass on everything. But it is unbelievable. It is actually kind of unbelievable. Remember, she's about joy and representing everybody, but she doesn't want to go to a Catholic dinner. She doesn't want to benefit them because apparently at one point the Catholic Church criticized the Dems for their stance on abortion. I guess the whole joy and being a president for everyone is more of just a hypocritical tagline, isn't it? All right, one last thing, and I can't believe this. CNN, sit down when I tell you this. Just sit for a second because you're not going to buy this. CNN fact-checked Tim Walz. It's gotten that bad. This is the headline. Walz makes false claims about Vance, Trump, and Project 2025. This is what they write. Walz claimed in a speech in North Carolina last Tuesdays, and now this is what Walz says. And now Trump is trying to create this new government entity that will monitor all pregnancies to enforce their abortion bans. And then he went on in Wisconsin to say, think about what they're saying in Project 2025. You're going to have to register with a new federal agency when you get pregnant. If you're going to lie, at least make it believable. Even CNN was like, oh gosh, we got to call this out. Oh, no. Just Tim Walz, you went so far. They went on to a couple other ones, but just think about this, how bad that has gotten that CNN is finally has to go, God, we got to fact check this guy. I mean, that no one on its face buys that crap. That is unbelievable. That's the kind of, I mean, for all the talk about Donald Trump's a liar, listen to this crap. A pregnancy registry? I mean, that's well beyond a scare tactic. I mean, I'm telling you, CNN was like, gosh, I can't believe it's gotten that bad. All right. I'm going to bring in Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire in a second. I want to talk about Culture, his new movie. It's phenomenal if you haven't seen it. I went to the premiere in Nashville with Matt and the Daily Wire folks. I cannot recommend this enough. Pure entertainment, but very, very insightful as well. Before I do that, I want to talk to you about another great guy, my friend Leo Grillo at Delta Rescue. Delta Rescue is doing amazing work. We joke about the dogs and the cats and how it's gotten involved in the process and eating and whatever. But Leo Grillo has been a champion of dogs, cats, horses, animals for decades. He started Delta Rescue by rescuing one dog, a Doberman, by the way. He named it Delta, and then that spawned Delta Rescue. And if you go to deltarescue.org, you can see what I'm talking about. It's continued to grow to be a no-kill sanctuary for life. This is not a shelter. This is if you are a dog lover or a cat lover or a rescuer of animals, go check out what I'm talking about. You will be so impressed with what Leo Grillo has done. But here's the thing. He does it because he loves it. He needs our help to sustain it. When you go to Delta Rescue, please consider a contribution. But more importantly, go to the estate planning kit up top and just pray or consider making a donation and making Delta Rescue part of your legacy. Okay? I'd really appreciate it. Go to deltarescue.org and check it out. All right. Without further ado, I want to show you the trailer from the brand new movie, Am I Racist? From Matt Walsh, The Daily Wire, and then bring in Matt.
Let's be clear, what's happening in this country, it's Nazism. Republicans are Nazis. You cannot separate yourselves from the bad white people.
Growing up in the 90s, I never thought much about race. Sure, you noticed, but never really seemed to matter that much, at least not to me.
Being a white, straight, cisgender man, it's the top of the pile.
I'm on the top of the pile. That's me. Am I racist?
I would really appreciate it if you left.
I'm trying to learn. I'm on this journey.
Can you please leave?
If I'm going to sort this out, I need to go deeper undercover. If I want to be an ally, I need to look like one. And what you're doing is you're stretching out of your whiteness. This is more for you in this field. White.
Folks.
White.
Trash. White supremacy. White woman. White boy.
White.
Entitlement.
White.
Centering.
White.
Silence.
Is there a black person around here?
There's a black person right here. Does he not exist?
They gonna say I'm racist, but they call everybody racist.
Hi, Robin.
Hi. And what's your name?
I'm Matt.
Matt. Hi, Matt.
Nice to meet you.
I just had to ask who you are because you have to be careful.
Never be too careful.
Matt, good to see you again. Congrats on the success of the movie. I don't know, to laugh or to cry.
Yeah, that's. I kind of had the same feeling making it, to be honest with you. There are many points throughout the film where you could kind of go either way with your reaction, because look, what we're I think hopefully exposing in the film, it's hilarious when you watch it in the film, but it's also quite dark because these are real people. This is a real thing, and this agenda, as we know, is very, very real.
The thing that I thought was interesting is that whether genuine or not, the bottom line in the movie, you go out to explore this issue and you're saying, okay, I want to learn more. And they almost want to stop you. It's a double-edged sword. I want to learn more about race. Well, you can't learn more about race because, well, you're white. I want to have my kid play with dolls that are black, but I can't have her dress up because, well, that would be cultural appropriation. It's funny because there's so many mixed signals that the other side is giving. They want you to learn more, but only so much. Exactly. And not only that, but there's it's a lose-lose, a catch-22, double-edged sword, whatever metaphor you want to use, that all throughout this thing, that if you follow the advice that they give you and you follow the path that they've laid before you, what you find is that you can't get to the end of it. It never ends. And you're also, by their own logic, you're not any less racist by the end of it. In fact, there's a moment when I'm talking to Robin DiAngelo, and she says that, in any given moment, you can be less racist or more racist, but you can never be not racist. That is, if you're a white person. So that's the lose-lose scenario they've set up, and I think they set it up that way. It's kind of a similar reason to why Apple designs an iPhone that kind of starts mysteriously malfunctioning every couple of years, so you got to go buy the new model. And it's kind of like that with the anti-racism grift, that they don't want to give you some solution to racism where you're good and you can just go and live your life. You got to keep coming back to them and paying for the seminars and the books and all the rest of it. Yeah, I want to get to the payment in a second. I did find it a bit ironic. You mentioned Robin DiAngelo. She's the author of that New York Times bestselling book, White Fragility, that there is a white woman that leads the way in telling white people how they should be dealing with people of color. That to me was the biggest irony of all, that there's a woman who's making boatloads of money basically saying, I'm going to tell you what black people think. I mean, of all of the ironies, I thought that was one of the greatest.
And it is. And if you point that out to these people or to Robin DiAngelo herself, which I did, she's very ready to kind of acknowledge that in a performative way. And so then you'll get the whole, oh, well, of course, I'm the worst of them all. I have the most to learn. So it becomes this opportunity for this performative humility, which I think for the white people that are in this grift, that's a lot of what they get out. I mean, aside from the money, they also get, it's kind of a classic, it's like the hypocrisy that Jesus warned about in the Gospels, the kind of performative going around, sort of self-flagellating, I'm the greatest sinner of all, and where you almost take a perverse pleasure in it. And it's kind of like that, but the DEI version.
You've brought up money a couple times, and it was interesting watching the film. How many times somebody said, yes, Matt, I will engage, I will talk to you about this, but here's what it's going to cost you.
Yeah, that's why when we're making the film, we made the decision early on that we're going to be transparent about it. We're going to make this part of the story. The fact that we had to pay these people to be in the film is very much a part of the story. And we kind of knew that as we were going through it. So when we were getting quoted these kind of absurdly high price tags, we said, all right, we'll pay it. But this is part of the story. And you would think that, this is what they do for a living, so they want to get paid for it. Okay. But you would also think that if you really care about racism and anti-racism and somebody just wants to talk to you about it, that you would talk about it and you would use that as an opportunity to, reach whatever their audience is, and you wouldn't necessarily need to get paid for it. I don't know. I mean, I've done many interviews in my time, and I've never asked to be paid for one. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that's true. For the audience, Matt, we offered him a ton of money. He said no. But it was fascinating because these people, to your point, I get asked all the time to talk about conservative issues or thought about from the right or perspective is from the Trump world. I want people to understand us. I want the movement to grow. And yet it seems like these guys, it's only about the money. In each case, it's as long as you pay me, then I'll talk about it.
And I think that's also why when people wonder, of course, well, why did they show up? Why didn't they leave? Why did they go along with it? How did you get them to stay and talk to you? We get that question all the time. And this is, I think, a big part of the answer is exactly what we're talking about here, that they had the dollar signs in their eyes and they wanted the money, and probably they were willing to overlook things that otherwise they would see as a red flag. I mean, it's interesting that Robin DiAngelo, for example, she put out a statement on her website right before the premiere of the film, denouncing the film and claiming that she was tricked and all this kind of stuff. But she says in her statement, she claims that when she sat down for the interview, that she could tell that, according to her, the interviewer, who would be me, was wearing an ill-fitting wig in her description. Now, number one, I think the wig was I think it's a very nice wig. And
it is very nice.
Thank you. So don't besmirch the dignity of the wig. But second, if you could tell that, then why didn't you get up and leave right away? I mean, if I came in for an interview and I could tell that it's like the guy's wearing a costume, I'd probably get up and leave. So I don't know if just this is her after the fact claiming that to try to save face, or if she wanted the money that badly that she was actually willing to sit there, even though she could, according to her, sniff out that things were not as they seemed.
But the thing that's fascinating about that argument, and again, I'll leave it to the audience, is it was one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. I will just leave it at that. I don't want to give away too much. That's your discretion how much you want to give away. But I would argue that it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. This interaction with Robin DiAngelo, the best-selling author of this book about how we all need to understand our whiteness and the inherent racism that exists, is there's nothing in it where you tricked her. You didn't lie to her. You asked her a series of logical questions. And I will suffice it to say she tied herself up in knots. So if she's embarrassed, it's on her. It's not like you had her get up and do like aerobics and tie her in knots and do something silly or dress up. You just literally took her down a series of logical questions that suffice it to say, I don't think she did a good job of answering.
Look, we didn't force anyone to do anything. Obviously, nobody had a gun to their head. And I certainly don't think that trick is the right word either, even though they're using that word. And, there's been some media coverage that is using that word. But at any point, like if anyone embarrassed, I guess this is the point. If anyone comes away from the movie embarrassed, if they feel embarrassed, well, they embarrassed themselves. It's because they answered in a way that they chose to answer. They didn't have to answer that. And if they, I don't want to, right, even though it's been reported, I don't like doing spoilers, but if Rob and DiAngelo, participated in certain exercises, let's say, during that interview that she wishes she hadn't, well, that was her own choice. And at any point she could have said, hey, this is ridiculous. I'm not going along with this, and shut it down, gotten up and left. But she didn't. And that's because some of the money had something to do with it, but also, all we were trying to do was take their own logic, their own arguments, their own worldview, and kind of present it back to them. And I think it put them in kind of sort of the sort of lose-lose situation that they present for everybody else most of the time.
So beyond Rob and DiAngelo and some of the people that made fools of themselves in the movie, and I think they made fools of themselves is actually the right phrase, because in each instance, I really loved your line of questioning. I think you do a phenomenal job of asking questions. I've always said to people, I really study interviews and how people ask, and admire people that can ask good, probative questions in a way that gets the subject to answer in an illustrative way, so that you're not just getting a canned answer, if you will. And I love the way that you asked each of these subjects a very logical question about what they believed and why, and tried to figure out where they'd go with it. So I understand why they look like fools in many cases, but beyond that, what has been the reaction specifically of Black people who have seen the movie? Do they find some of the people that do what they do in this movie in terms of try to preach DEI, do they say that doesn't represent me? What has been that reaction?
It's been interesting from the Black audience for the film. First of all, this is according even to the media reports, and I honestly don't know how they figure out the demographics for this, but there have been reports, I think Variety that had one that, the movie has a diverse audience, and it's not just white conservatives going to see it as much as the left would like to tell themselves that. That's not the case. And there's the kind of whatever data that they have on this stuff. But then anecdotally, as you can imagine, I've gotten a lot of feedback on the movie. I've heard from a lot of people, and I don't know. I'm sure they're out there, but I've yet to hear from a Black person who saw the movie and came away and thought it was racist or was offended. I honestly have not gotten that reaction one time yet. And
I can see why, but have they said, I don't like these charlatans? Like, that's what I came away from thinking. Like, you mentioned Jesus and the Gospels, and I kept thinking, around Lent, he talks to us about this a lot, about how we should act. And I was thinking, like, if I'd be pissed to see people depict, people of my culture and say, this is what they're really like, and this is how you should atone or whatever. And I'm intrigued, genuinely intrigued, because if I saw that movie as a person of color, I'd say, I don't like how these people are taking advantage of a situation that our society is grappling with.
Yeah, that has very much been the feedback. Black and white audiences, actually, that's one of the main takeaways, is that these grifters and I kind of resent the things that they're saying, because whether you're if you're a Black person, you hear what the grifters are saying. I certainly would resent being painted as this kind of helpless, infantilized victim, which is what you get if you're not a white person. That's the way you're portrayed by the DEI grifters. And then, of course, on the other hand, I know as a white person, as a straight white male, the worst of all, I know that what we hear is that we're the villains and we're being constantly demonized. But in both cases, and I've said this before, that I don't like being demonized. I'm not a big fan of it. I prefer if I wasn't. But I actually prefer that. I'd prefer to be demonized than to be infantilized and told that I'm a victim.
Yeah.
And told that I have no agency over my own life. So I think that in many ways, in terms of the narrative, you get kind of the shorter end of the stick there. I would rather you tell me, oh, you're an evil, terrible person, and just leave it at that. When you tell me that, you have no control over your life and everything that's happened to you, it's because of this and this and this, and you need all these systemic changes so that you can, that is the ultimate demoralizing message. And I think that that's what the audience generally is taking away from it. And that's why this movie, it kind of cuts across racial lines, but even political lines. I mean, I've again, this is anecdotal, but I've heard from many people who say that they are Democrat, they vote Democrat, they're liberal, self-described, not fans of mine, don't like me, but are distraught to have to report that they actually like the movie, because I think even they are looking at this and saying, hey, well, like, they don't want to align themselves with Rob and DiAngelo, and so they want to be able to say that that's not us, that's not what we stand for. Now, I actually think, though, that Rob and DiAngelo is, I can see why if you're on the left, you'd want to disown her, but I think, unfortunately for them, that she does represent their worldview, in fact. But either way, it's been interesting to see the demographics.
The thing that I find fascinating about their worldview, if you truly believe that racism is a major systemic problem in our society, like any other problem, you should be trying to figure out how to solve it, right? How do we end this problem, end this epidemic, end this whatever? I mean, sickness. I mean, like in each case, when you are somebody that's out there trying to end something, a sickness, an epidemic, whatever it is, your goal is to eradicate it, to solve it. And what I find about the folks in the movie is that they don't want it solved. They want you to say, unfortunately, you'll always be sick. We can't help you. And so that's it. Whereas if I actually really wanted to solve racism, I would say, okay, what are the steps that can be taken in society, not which will allow it to perpetually be a problem? And that's what I think is so fascinating about this. If you're on the left, as you point out, I would want somebody to say, here's the problem. Here's how we are going to solve it and end it so it doesn't occur anymore or is eradicated, et cetera, whatever that problem is. And I find that the people that you encounter in the movie at heart don't want it to go away. They need it to go on.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. That's why we kind of say at the end of the movie, there's a little, I have my speech that I give at the very end. It's tongue in cheek, obviously, but the message there is actually what I think. And we say in there that, they're selling us a disease and telling us there's no cure. And it's exactly what you just said, that it's kind of like, well, they want to, if racism is a disease in this analogy, then they want to manage the symptoms, let's say. They don't want to cure it, because if they cure it, then you're not going back to them. But if it's a disease that you're kind of then you have to keep going back to them for more treatment. Now, it is true that racism as a societal issue is never going to be solved in the sense of eradicating racism from the hearts of human beings forever. That's not going to happen. There's always going to be racism, just like there's always going to be, hatred, envy, spite, all these negative human emotions will always be out there in the world. But on an individual basis, it is possible for a person to just not be racist. Like that's a possible thing to achieve. And I think actually most people in America have achieved that with basically no effort. But that ultimately is what the DEI grifters don't want anyone to know. They don't want you to know that about yourself. They don't want you to know that you aren't racist. They want to convince you that you are, so that they can then sell you the treatment plan.
Yeah. The weekend that it came out in theaters, you posted on your Twitter feed that several theater workers, I don't think they were the owners, the workers, were trying to figure out how to dissuade people from going or making it very difficult for them to buy tickets. Despite that, this is what the Hollywood Reporter, no friend to conservatives, wrote in their publication. Matt Walsh's much talked about documentary, Am I Racist?, placed 7th in its second outing with $2.5 million from 1,600 locations for a domestic tally of $9 million, the best showing for a political doc in 2 decades. In 2 decades. What does that say to you?
I think it says a lot of things. I think that the biggest thing is that there's obviously a real appetite, in the culture for this kind of content. And we're not the first, at the Daily Wire, we're obviously not the first people to figure that out. And there have been others. Angel Studios puts out a lot of great films and is, also tapping into an audience that is underserved. But it's all part of that same message. And I also think that it's not just creating content for an audience that is often ignored, but also putting that content in places like theaters. And there's there's the audience there, and they want to go support it. And it also tells us, more broadly speaking, that, and I hope this is one of the main takeaways for the film, aside from the actual message of the film itself, is that, as conservatives, we are not fighting the culture war at all if we are not creating art and art, films, shows, music, anything. Those are all art forms, obviously. And if we're not doing that, if we're not in that game, then we're really not fighting the culture war at all, because art is what shapes the culture. And for too long, I think conservatives have, with a few exceptions, have kind of put up their hands and said, well, we don't need to do this. And we've done a lot of commentary and that kind of thing. And I have a daily podcast where I do commentary, so I think there's obviously value in that. But you've got this is how you shape the culture. Commenting on culture and pointing out the problems is important. We do that. That's good. But the shaping of what the culture is itself is done through art.
So just walk me through the business decision. You had a very large degree of success with What Is a Woman. You go do this. What was the decision to put this in theaters? I don't know what kind of budget you guys had behind this, because to get this kind of success, the most successful showing for a political doc in 2 decades, is a pretty big deal. What was the commitment of the Daily Wire? Was it, hey guys, we got to do this, we got to throw mud at the wall and see what sticks, or why was it this movie that you guys felt was worth going the distance on and getting it in theaters and putting real money behind it?
Yeah, well, it was a major commitment from the Daily Wire and a major investment and a major risk. I mean, let's be honest about it, because if documentaries in particular historically do not perform well at the box office. People just don't. Now, millions of people go and watch documentaries, but they generally don't go to the theaters to see them. They wait till they're available, at home. And that's also what we ran into when we first approached theaters about it. We thought that maybe they'd be nervous about the content. They actually weren't really. They were nervous about what the genre. And so we had to kind of prove to them there's an audience through pre-sale tickets, and we expanded theaters up to 1,500 or 1,600. So there's a real risk involved. And usually with documentaries, if you get them in theaters, they're there. They don't chart at all. They make a few $1,000 or whatever, and then they're gone. And if that were to happen, then hey, I mean, it's not the worst. It happens to documentaries all the time, so we'd be in good company. But that's kind of a failure. There's a scoreboard now, and people can see it, and they can see that you didn't put any points on it. And so there's kind of that PR branding risk, which is substantial, and then there's all the money you lose on top of it. So. But the reason we decided to do it is that we all believed in the film, and we also believe that it's a piece of entertainment as well as being a documentary that has a message. It's entertainment. It's funny, and it's something that deserves to be seen in theaters, and it's a real theatrical experience. We believe that. And so we decided that although it's a risk, it's a calculated and smart risk. And we, but you got to just take the jump and do it, which is what we did.
So based on the success of this, is this now something that, and I know the Daily Wire keeps growing in terms of its offerings, right? That it wants to do more, not just, obviously you guys have a ton of successful podcasts there and shows, but you've now ventured into theaters. I know there's some children's stuff. What is it what signal does this send to you about how far and wide you want to expand this?
I think it shows us that, the sky is the limit. It's always going to be hardest, the first one when you get into this space, and you're you're now, we've made films before, we've made What Is Woman, as you point out, but now you're like competing against. I mean, it's kind of surreal when you have the film in and you're looking at it and you're competing against like Beetlejuice and Transformers, who of course they grossed way more than we did. It's a tens of millions of dollar budget movie and a big IP and all that. But still, like that's the world you're in now, is that. And so it's always the most daunting the first time that you do it. But now that we have and we've kind of established that, I certainly think we plan on continuing.
So, you brought up how we fight culture wars and how we have to be everywhere. I am personally shocked in this presidential year that more culture issues aren't part of the dialogue right now, right? DEI and Kamala Harris, defunding the police, even cell phones in school. I'm in Virginia. This is something that the Youngkin administration has made a big deal. I think it's wildly popular with parents. I think that Trump should seize on this and make it a bigger deal to reach out to suburban moms. Are you shocked that culture is not more of an issue in the presidential election right now?
I don't know how much I agree if it's not a big, I think it is a pretty big
then disagree.
deal.
What do you think? What issue is in there that I'm missing?
Well, I'll put it this way. I think that, to your point, because you are tapping into something that's correct, which is that there's not, it's not like there's the one big cultural issue that is sort of defining the election. That isn't happening. I think you're right. So it's more of like, it's like everything. It's just a hodgepodge. All of these things factor in, but then a lot gets lost, I think, because we're not focusing on one thing or another. And I think that it would benefit us going forward to, hone in, I think, more deliberately on a couple of these major cultural issues and make them the message, especially going into November. I mean, crime is another one. That is very much a cultural issue, but it's come up a lot. I mean, obviously, it's been a topic of conversation, but I think you have to make this the thing that we're talking about. But the other issue here is that we know that the mainstream media still retains a huge amount of power to drive the narrative, even in spite of the fact that we've got, X with Elon and all these things. We have other ways we can get around the mainstream media, but they still have that enormous amount of power. And they don't want this election to really be about anything, because Kamala Harris isn't about anything. She doesn't really believe in anything. She's obviously, we know she's flipped on all of her signature issues. And so they don't want it to be about anything in particular, other than just kind of like this vague sense that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, as they keep saying. And I think that's one of the reasons why maybe those issues haven't been more the focus.
So there's news that has just come out that George Soros has purchased about 200 radio stations. The FCC expedited the ownership approval process and literally went out of its way to do something that it normally doesn't do, to make sure that he could get these quick by Election Day. Do you think that they're doing this because it's George Soros, or in part because they're worried that conservatives, to your point, we've finally started to have some success and are getting around some of the mainstream dominance?
I think it's both. I think it's both. And I hadn't heard that story. It doesn't surprise me. It's pretty terrifying, though, that he's able to wield that kind of power. But of course, we already that's been the case now for decades, and we've known that. But yeah, this I'm sure is in large part to solve what for them is a major problem, that although they do still have profound ability to drive the narrative, it's not a complete. They don't have a monopoly over the narrative anymore like they had for so many years. And for them, that's a crisis level problem. And I guess they're trying to find ways around it. And we know that they're, one of the biggest things they'd love to do is find a way to take down Elon and pry him loose of X. I don't think they're going to be able to do that. So they're probably looking for other ways to kind of flood the zone. And this is, I imagine, part of that.
I think back a year or two ago, maybe 3, every corporation was talking about ESG, environmental social justice, and DEI, kind of what you addressed in the movie, talking about how these standards that they were going to adhere to and how they were going to hire more people and this and that to try to make the world more equitable. Conservatives pushed back, and I would argue effectively, to start to talk about how this was a wrong decision for corporations. They should be worried about making good products, their bottom line, etc. You've talked about the success of the Daily Wire in your movie, breaking through the ecosphere. You know, the CEO of Daily Wire, Jeremy Boring, introduced razors and have been very successful. I mean, like products, movies, culture, corporations. Are we on the path to have more successes, or are these isolated instances? Do you think that we're learning to fight better, or is that too much of a read into it?
I think we are. And we talk about culture. I mean, there have been, and you pointed to some of them, there have been some pretty significant cultural victories that none of them are complete, let's say, but there have been significant cultural victories from the right in recent years. Another big one is the gender ideology. And it's probably maybe the most successful I've seen conservatives be in my lifetime, is on that issue in the last couple of years. And we've made major inroads in the fight against that, both legislatively and politically, but also just culturally. And so I like to think that there's a roadmap for the future that we're seeing kind of laid out here, maybe a blueprint. But it's a sustained effort. Like you can't take any one of these things and then rest on your laurels and say that the fight is over. It's like you got to, once you figure out, okay, well, this is how you fight back, then it becomes the everyday grind of of doing it every day.
There's a story in Axios that said Harris's conservative culture play, from camo hats to libertarian rhetoric, the Harris campaign is staking its claim to symbols of conservative identity. The appeals to convey that Democrats are not trying to undo a conservative way of life, and that red and blue Americans are not immutably divided by culture. They're clearly sensing that they've got to be careful on this. And I can't believe that Axios is saying that by wearing a camo hat and issuing a Harris Waltz camo hat, then somehow that's a play on conservative values. But I think they are sensing something, which is that we're winning on some of the stuff that they assumed was their territory.
It does show you that the camo hat stuff, of course, is ridiculous, and I hope that they continue down that path. I hope that's their best move. I hope that's their brilliant strategy.
Wear a camo hat.
Right, wear a camo hat, whatever, play country music at your rally and see how far that gets you. It's not going to get you very far. But it does show that they're a little bit on the defense. Another thing that tells you that is that Kamala Harris has been basically running to the right on immigration and crime.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous. She's lying. She's lying about her record. She's lying about what she actually plans to do. But the fact that she feels the need to present herself as, a border security person and as a crime and a law and order person, the fact that she feels the need to present herself that way, I think shows you that we're winning on those issues. That's a big indicator.
Yeah. Matt, congrats on the movie. Just for folks that haven't been able to see it in theaters, where does it go? I mean, is it going to end up as a streaming? Somewhere streaming? Is it going to be at Daily Wire? If people, how long do people have to see it in theaters? Where does it go from here, and where can people catch up on it?
It'll be for as long as it's having success in theaters. That's where it will be. So for the time being, certainly we encourage everyone who hasn't seen it to go to theaters and watch it. Go to amiracist.com and get tickets. If you've already seen it, you can get tickets again. Go watch it again. Bring your friends, bring your liberal neighbors, whoever. Tell them you're going to watch something else and bring them to that movie. Whatever you got to do. And we thank everyone for the support of the film.
All right. Well, congrats on the success of it. It's unbelievable what you guys have been able to do on this and so many other issues. I appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thanks for watching a big panel show tomorrow and the updated Road to 270 on Friday. Continue to subscribe, hit that notification button. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.